I will examine the autobiography of the Russian immigrant composer Igor Stravinsky. His autobiography was published in 1935 when he was 53 years old. The autobiography chronicles the first half century of Stravinsky's life. And can you please turn the page? Thank you. I think it's important to emphasize that Stravinsky wrote his memoir in France in his French period. After his exile in Switzerland during the war, Stravinsky settled for nearly 20 years in France, where the music scene was really intense. Harlow Robinson wrote a really interesting article about the music scene in Paris in the era, focusing on the Russian immigrant composers. The title of the article is More Than a Tra-La-La on Vernon Duke, Igor Stravinsky, and Russian Musical Emigres. According to Harlow, Stravinsky and his music so dominated the scene that all others, Prokofiev, Bukowski, and Nabokov, were showed aside. It helped, of course, that Stravinsky got in France first with his spectacularly successful compositions like The Firebird, The Petrushka, and The Rite of Spring. In the highly competitive French musical market flooded with Russian emigres of various political and artistic stripes, Stravinsky was always one step ahead. He was forever reinventing himself. I would like to recommend another study which could be useful for us. It's called In Stravinsky's Orbit, Responses to Modernism in Russian Paris. Clara Moritz's work is an insightful and well-researched study of the world of Russian immigrant music and culture in Paris in the 1920s. Please, can you turn the page? Stravinsky wrote his autobiography to air his views on his development as a composer and the performance of his music. The book starts with his childhood and ends in the late 1920s, so the second half of his life is not discussed in this book. Stravinsky writes on his patrons and his friends who helped him along the way. He details his cooperation with dancer choreographer Nijinsky and has anecdotes about his contemporary composers and artists like Rimsky-Korsakov, Tchaikovsky, Debussy, Eric Satie, and Picasso. His writing is very informative, detailing the process of matching the dance choreography and the stage decor and costumes to the music, and shows how international the music scene was with performances all over Europe and the USA. The autobiography shows a whole new different perspective and understanding more of Stravinsky's thoughts behind each composition. In the book, Stravinsky focused mostly on specific moments of his life in becoming a composer and the environment that deeply influenced his creativity. Stravinsky seems like a reserved man who does not give details about his personal life or feelings. The most important thing was him, the music, and the autobiography shows his love towards the music. Please, can you turn the page again? Thank you. I would like to talk about the genre a little bit. In the study of Daniel Stein and Martin Buchler, we can read about the genre of the musical autobiography. According to the writers, it makes sense to understand autobiography as a particular mode of life narrative and musical autobiography as a particular realization of this mode. Stein and Buchler emphasize that musical autobiographies are often relational. They relate the life story of the narrating musician to a whole network of people and institutions that have supported and promoted the writer in his musical and literary endeavors. Stravinsky's autobiography clearly shows this relational aspect. We can read about his network, his inspirations, his masters, and his collaborations. Stravinsky was greatly inspired by his mentor Rimsky-Korsakov, and he affected deeply his life, his music, and his process to compose. In the autobiography, Igor Stravinsky wrote about how he believed he was destined to change the face of the music. Despite his aspirations, he wrote often how his parents disapproved his career choices. Because of the unsupportive family, Stravinsky needed the support from the right teacher to help him fulfill his dreams, and this teacher was really The autobiography starts with the composer's childhood. Stravinsky spent his early years studying piano and writing music. He was the son of an opera singer, and despite his family's connection to the music, his parents did not want a life of music for their son. And by the time he entered university, he gave in to parental pressure and he studied law and philosophy, but he was not enthusiastic. He was studying law with the son of a composer, Rimsky-Korsakov. Stravinsky was able to compose some of his early compositions, and Rimsky-Korsakov was a young artist. While Stravinsky continued to earn his law degree at university, he spent his free time writing music and studying composition privately with Rimsky-Korsakov. I think it's important to note that the master also wrote a biography called My Musical Life, and it was published in 1909. In his book, the Russian composer described his experiences in the musical life of the late 19th century, his role in the development of Russian nationalism in music, and his relations with his contemporaries. Maybe the autobiography of his dearly adored master could have inspired Stravinsky to write about his life in the music. I would like to mention another work similar to Stravinsky's and Rimsky-Korsakov's musical autobiography. It's the collected letters of Tchaikovsky. Stravinsky mentions in his autobiography how Tchaikovsky's music inspired him. Tchaikovsky was not only a composer, he was also interested in literature, and he was a compulsive letter writer. He can find an edition with his collected letters. The book contains almost 700 letters, and these writings offer unique insight into the composer's life. The letters range from his 21st birthday to a few weeks before his death. Tchaikovsky discusses both his own music and that of his contemporaries, as well as European literature and art, and how he was evolving and becoming a composer. And please, could you turn the page again? Thank you. The World War and the Revolution had a huge impact on Stravinsky's life. When the war broke out, he was already a successful international artist, and he already lived outside of his country. He spent 6 years in Switzerland, and after nearly 20 years in France. Before the war, the revolution, and the revolution, he visited his country on a regular basis. In the biography, he emphasized the importance of his country and his culture, and he mentioned how much he appreciated when he got the chance to visit Russia. Paris gave him the opportunities to achieve memorable successes, but he sometimes wanted to move away from the city. While he was in Paris, he had the opportunity of meeting several persons of importance in the world of music, but Stravinsky, at the end of the successful Parisian season, regularly had a short rest outside France because, as he wrote it, wanted to refresh. After the Parisian season, he returned many times to his estate in Russia to devote himself entirely to the music. He lived his life in exile even before the war and the revolution, because he knew so well how intense was the music life in France, and he wanted to collaborate with international artists. So Stravinsky's exile was heartbreaking and amazing in the same time. According to the biography, Stravinsky's life was a constant flux. He changed his home, his base regularly, and he needed and wanted to travel a lot because of his work. He got the chance to travel around Europe, and he visited several countries, for example, Germany, Spain, Hungary, Austria, Italy, and Monte Carlo. And we can read lengthy descriptions about his travel experiences and impressions about the people and how these visits affected his music. And he also wrote about how the different cultures reacted to his music. It seems Stravinsky found traveling as an important inspirational source. He was always eager to go and visit new countries and meet up with another inspiring and successful artists. Sometimes a sudden illness or troubles with his family made him to stay at home. For example, there is a part where he tells the story of Bertha, who suddenly died when Stravinsky was traveling. Bertha had entered his parents' service before Stravinsky was born, and according to the writer, she had looked after him in his earliest days. And he considered Bertha as a friend to whom he was closely attached and whom he loved as a second mother. Stravinsky was a reserved man. He didn't write much about his personal life or feelings, but this chapter is different in terms of his approach. Here he describes his feelings and he wrote, "A cruel and unexpected blow was to overwhelm me with sorrow just after I reached home." And Stravinsky also wrote how this event affected his work and how he felt unproductive and can leave the house for a long time when he was grieving. And he wrote also, "Several weeks went by in sorrow before I could resume my work. Change of scene put me on my feet again. We went into the mountains for the summer." I think it's interesting to see how he reflects on the importance of traveling. We can see after he left his home in Russia, he was in this constant state of traveling and moving and visiting friends in different countries and changing homes and never really finding a home. He longed for a peaceful home, and he imagined this home mostly in the countryside, without any noise, with peace, and without the busyness of the city. His desire to find a home for his family and also for his music is a recurring topic in the autobiography. He wrote that, "Once there in France, I had at once to set about finding some place in which I could definitely settle myself with my family." Stravinsky's life was really intense. It seems he settled down someplace and he had to do the same process again and again. And he called his homes places and not actually homes, which is a telling data. But he also wrote that, "I settled in France, which had become my second motherland." So he has found his home in this intense period in the constant moving and traveling process. Can you turn the page again, please? Thank you. The World War and the Revolution had a huge impact on Stravinsky's life. He refers to the revolution as "those sinister days," and when he writes about the war and the events of the revolution, he always emphasizes the destruction and the loss. The topic of grief and loss and the elimination of his old life is a recurring theme in the autobiography. He wrote about how his old compositions were left in his country house in Russia, where, together with his whole library, his work disappeared during the revolution. This event shaped how the artist saw the concept of time and space. The autobiography is based on a contrast. Stravinsky's life became fractured. He had a life before the revolution and a life after the revolution. In the autobiography, we can read long descriptions about how Stravinsky's old life in Russia, his childhood memories in the countryside, his meetings with his idol Rimsky-Korsakov affected him. Stravinsky wrote a score for his master, but this work also unfortunately disappeared in Russia during the revolution, along with many other things which he had left there. According to the composer, he can no longer remember the music, but he can remember the idea at the root of its conception. Stravinsky's memories are connected to Russia, the country, and the revolution appears as a destructive force. And please, can you turn the page? Thank you. So memories play a big role in the autobiography. Stravinsky felt he was forced to leave Russia behind, but he was able to reconnect with his homeland through his memories and through the retelling of his stories from the past. The autobiography is an interesting piece of the Russian immigrant literature that presents the problem of the compulsion to attach to and to break away from one's homeland. Stravinsky's autobiography draws the line of being here, being present, and being there, so being in the past. This concept creates a specific opposing way to represent the word. In my research, I wanted to show some examples how he wrote about these concepts. I think Stravinsky's autobiography is a remarkable work of the Russian immigrant experience, and it's absolutely worth to read and research. And thank you so much.